In last month's video, I was stressed and exhausted while trying to graduate from Harvard University in just 10 days. I was studying day and night, everything from modern day city planning to ancient and sometimes even imaginary architectural design concepts. And by day 7, I was ready to give up. In desperate need of a reset, I on a whim hopped on the first train out of Vilamora and landed in Portugal's stunning capital, Lisbon. But with my final exam deadlines pressing down on me, I only had 12 hours to see as many of the city's most iconic architectural landmarks as possible, from futuristic pavilions to ancient towers. Could I really experience Lisbon's top architectural masterpieces in just one day, while still catching my last train back to Vilamora? Stick around to the end to see if I made it, and which location stole the show completely.
I have just arrived in Lisbon and we are already at our very first building of the day. This is, although you might not be able to tell, the roof of the building. You're able to walk directly up onto it. I'll give you 2 guesses as to where this is then. This is the MAAT, M-A-A-T, the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology. And this was designed by a British architect actually, Amanda Levetta. It was opened in 2016 and you can see here, this is the roof. So it's along the Tagus River here and it has connections all along the promenade. The idea is that the building almost like flows up from the river and it almost unfolds that you can walk on top of it and that you can go down inside. So far, very, very beautiful. And this is the bridge I came on to get here. After walking around up here, I'm gonna go downstairs and try find the way in. As you can see above me, these are some of the three-dimensional tiles, some of the 15,000 three-dimensional tiles that make up the surface of the building. This is in reflection of the Azulejo tradition. I believe that's how you say it. But it's basically the tradition that's prominent in architectural construction making in Portugal that you see so much of in Lisbon and Porto. There's all these tiles absolutely everywhere and they're beautifully painted. I definitely want to get like one of these for my home. But yeah, this is to reflect the water and they've purposefully been left blank, which I think is particularly interesting for like an art center. And if these tiles are meant to represent that, why aren't they painted? I mean, all of the great ancient monuments like the Parthenon, they were all painted. So don't really know why they left it blank. My attempt at seeing the museum was an absolute fail because they're currently changing over the exhibition at the moment and so it won't be open for another week. That's the problem when you try to see Lisbon in one day. It is certainly a city you could spend weeks or months here and not see everything. But, you know, it is what it is. I saw the inside a little bit and it reminds me of Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim in New York, just with the curved walls and the way the gallery's set up. Instead of hanging around here on the roof, I'm going to head straight to my next destination, which is just down the river at the Belem Tower. The tower was built in the 16th century between 1515 and 1520, or 1514 and 1520. It's a really good example of Portuguese post-Gothic style architecture. It's called Manuel, or something like this. The architect for this was Francisco de Arula. It was originally a tower defense for the Tagus River here, and it was originally completely surrounded by water. You can see there's like 4 cannons all around it that were to help act as its defense. But now it's just a tourist spot for people to come and look at. There's a really interesting story that goes along with one of the carvings on the building here, and it's that of a rhinoceros. It's supposedly the first rhinoceros to set foot in Europe after the medieval times, and it was given to the king of Portugal at the time, who decided in his wisdom to use the rhinoceros to battle an elephant to see which beast was stronger. The rhinoceros won, and it was shipped off to the Pope so as a gift. But unfortunately the ship sank and the rhinoceros died, which isn't that great. The architecture itself is incredibly beautiful, and you can see a lot of especially the architectural styles, you can see are these barrels on all of the corners. That's really reminiscent of that style of architecture. I have just arrived at Prac de Comercio. I hope that's how you pronounce that. But this is basically the main square of Lisbon. The plan today is to try see as much as possible of Lisbon in just one singular day. I have researched this, I have mapped this route out, and the very first thing that you gotta do is you gotta go get a Lisbon card from in that building over there. Just there. This card basically gives you entry into, I'll show the list. It's a ton of different attractions. You can get like a 1 day, 2 day, maybe 3 day. I'm gonna do the 1 day and see how much is it actually possible to get done in the first day. But to start off the tour, I wanna start off here, which is our main plaza. This area was actually devastated in a really significant earthquake in 1755. It was meant to be like the worst earthquake that ever hit Europe, and it basically decimated all of Lisbon. And there's an archaeological museum that I'm gonna go see later, so that'll probably give you a little bit more context as to the true devastating nature of this earthquake. But this here was actually the king's palace originally. And after the earthquake, that was actually the king, that guy, King Jose I. It was obviously here, completely decimated. And basically there was thousands of people who died during this earthquake. Everyone's homes got destroyed. It was disastrous. People then had to start setting up tents and living anywhere they could, basically. And the king too also had to live in a tent. That being said, like, his tent was not the same as everyone else's. His tent had 400 rooms, and I think it said to have, like, was it 25 windows on just one elevation? This is a tent now, remember, okay? So yes, everyone was in terrible, terrible squalor, but the king was doing what kings generally do. This entire square was then redesigned by Marquez Pombal, I believe that's how you say it. And he obviously redesigned it in this beautiful neoclassical facade with a three-sided cloister, and it opens up onto the sea. This is to represent, like, this was obviously like for trade, and this was a big, huge marketplace. But Portugal, and specifically Lisbon, they were known for their age of exploration through the sea. And so the spice trade and finding America and all this kind of stuff. Maritime routes are like hugely important to the Portuguese, and you can see that in their architecture. There's lots of knots, there's lots of motifs of ships and sailing. Basically, the guy that took over the organization of this entire plaza and the actual reconstruction of the city, he took precautions into his own hands, and they actually named the system in which these buildings were built after him. So it's called a pommel cage, and all of these buildings you see here all follow it. They would pre-construct these timber frames that are diagonal and like horizontal and vertical timbers that would then bend and shift if the ground ever shakes. So previously it was all stone and brick. So as soon as you start shaking the floor, that all goes to hell. And whereas with timber, if you have this internal frame, it allows the building to sway just a little bit, and that helps it with the seismic activity. They would actually build these, almost like prefabricate them here in the square before they would put them up into all of these buildings. And they would have the armies march in sequence around them to make sure that they would stay upright as the ground was moving. One of the things that the Portuguese learned from the devastating earthquake was that the problem with having your buildings so close together is obviously if one falls, is going to fall into all of the other ones. And also the spread of fire was immense. I mean, nearly the entire city burned down after the earthquake, which is almost nearly as devastating as the earthquake itself. That being said, then when they rebuilt Lisbon, they did it with streets that were like super, super wide, and the buildings are spread apart into grids. You can actually see that from, this is Arc de Justa. I'm going to go up there in a minute and you'll be able to see just how wide the streets are, especially that one's the main promenade that runs through the heart of Lisbon.
Here, Lisbon really began to open up before me. Once the gateway to Portugal's empire, this grand plaza is where history and daily life collide. It feels like a launch pad, and due to the Belem Tower's queues, I'm officially on the race against time. Lisbon is a layered city, and one answer to its vertical urbanism is the Elevador de Santa Justa. With time running short, the elevator was the quickest way to our next destination. I'm here at the Archaeological Museum of Carmo, which is right in the heart of Lisbon itself. You can see this was traditionally a cathedral and built in 1439, I believe. It was then destroyed during an earthquake in 1755, and they just never fixed it. I don't know, maybe they got bored, maybe they just didn't like it, but it's meant to go along with this 19th century fascination that they had with ruins going on at the time, and they just thought it was more beautiful to preserve it, and now it's an archaeological museum. So they've got lots of interesting features like fountains and tombs, lots of just architectural pieces that you can see all on the walls here. And they've got beautiful little tags that explain what everything is, some of which they don't actually know. They just have them, but they have no idea where they actually came from. It makes it a real interesting building, certainly one you can only enjoy in the sunshine. But yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. The quickest way to understand if a cathedral is Renaissance or Gothic is generally to look out for two key features, one being flying buttresses and the other being gargoyles. In this building, along the south facade, there actually is flying buttresses, but they were added 10 years after the initial construction to give it a little bit more stability.
After a very, very long day, quite exhausting day if I'm being honest, with a lot of walking and a ton of Ubers, we could not leave Lisbon without checking this thing out. This is Álvaro Siza's 1998 Expo Pavilion. You see this huge sheet above me? That's concrete, which is wild to think about. You would never expect concrete to be able to do anything remotely like that. You always think of it as such a heavy material, and here it is just suspended between two buildings. It actually has steel or reinforced steel cables that run from one building to the other, and then they basically built the framework around it. Well, they tightened the steels and then they built the framework around it before letting the concrete set. And you can see it's only 12 centimeters of concrete, but the way that it hangs from one building to the other, it just looks absolutely beautiful. I have no idea what they're using it for nowadays, because it's basically just empty, and there's like some girls over there doing a TikTok dance and whatever. But yeah, overall, really, really beautiful. And honestly, I can't wait to get home. I'm so tired. It's been such a long day. That's kind of a wrap for the Lisbon vlog. I'm gonna go back and finish studying for my Harvard video and sleep like crazy. All right, see you in the next one.